Welcome to today's Life Coach Pod. We have a great show in store for you today. We have been looking at careers this week, and I think it's very important. Monday, we talked about small business success. Yesterday, Amy talked to us about how to COVID-proof your career. And today, Keith is here to talk about how to, I'm going to say executive presence because that's the shortcut for what it is, but I really want to make sure you're looking out for who you are and your personal reputation and how to move forward in your career. So that's what we're digging into. But of course, at first, I have to give you a Chirpenstein update. These are the chirps on day 7. I think it's interesting that we're starting to see a little attitude, pretty much matching that might be like an adolescent bird. So I love this guy in the front. I love that he kind of has given me a little shade. I want to reassure everyone that the mom and dad do not hang out at the nest after the babies are born. They just go fetch food. So while they're gone, and typically when a lawnmower blower is out there, that's going to scare away everybody anyway, I take a fast picture and then I get the hell out of the way. So I know people are freaked out about that, but all 5 are still there. And they're starting to have social distance because I think it's getting crowded in there. And I expect that we're going to start to see feathers very, very soon. So for those of you who have no idea what day it is a Wednesday. It used to be called Hump Day. Is that still a thing? I don't know. Is it every day Hump Day? And I think everybody's day drinking. I'm not sure. But it is the 29th of April. If you have to go beg, borrow, and steal money to make the rent or pay your mortgage, now's the time. Go fund those bank accounts because they're going to start pulling that money out in a couple of days. It's also March 60th for anyone sheltering in place. We've made it, guys, 60 days. That can't even be true. I mean, I started on March 10th, but here we go. All right, so our upcoming guest tomorrow, we have Miles Smith showing up who's going to talk about retirement. And I always add, can I even do that? I remember when I worked in retirement, people didn't think it was true. Jeffrey Meyer will be here on Friday to talk about the art of storytelling. And then on Monday, I'll be back with Motivation Monday, which is always fun to see if I'm motivated. All right, so to set the stage for our topic today, I'm going to just do 2 quick, fast facts for you. The first one is from ResearchGate, and this is about what leaders are going to need in the next 5 years. And I want to give you the caveat that I know not everybody is inclined to be a leader, wants to be a leader, sees themselves as a leader. It doesn't matter. The point is, though, you do actually end up leading in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in your home or among your friends or whatever. In some ways, you're a leader. But also these are things that are reasonable for you to expect from your leaders as well. So keep that perspective. If it's not you, it's going to be someone you care about or someone you work with. And what they are seeing here is the qualities over the next 5 years it does not surprise me. And now that we're talking about a pandemic, that creativity is going to be high on the list. And so is integrity and global thinking. Integrity is everything, right? If you can't trust the person, you don't want to follow them. So I'm surprised it didn't make it to number 1. But creativity is going to be essential as well. And then, of course, the ability to influence, how open you are, your level of dedication. It's interesting that ended up coming out a little bit lower. That used to be a big thing, company loyalty, obeying the authoritative model. And that's not coming up as high anymore. Same with the focus on sustainability and humility and fairness. Just not so big because if you're not creative and if you don't have integrity, the rest kind of doesn't matter. So that's the first fast fact. The other has to do with the top leadership competency, and they grouped them into 5 themes. And it is stunning to me. This study was done by the Harvard Business Review. I don't have the date, but I was working on something, or it's copyrighted by Harvard Business Review. It was actually done by Sunny Dials. But I'm trying to find research that's fairly contemporary because our world's changing so fast right now. And I think it's super interesting that strong ethics and safety, high ethical and moral standards, zoomed to the top of the list. That's 67% of folks looking for this in leaders. And so this is global leaders asked to rate the qualities. These rose to the top, high ethical and moral standards. This is not unreasonable to expect from all of our leaders, guys, including elected officials. High ethical and moral standards, I think, is what we're struggling with right now as we even move through this pandemic. You can tell the folks who are really, really doing their best to be authentic and to provide us with the truth, basically, with the truth of where things stand, and even when they don't know answers. And then providing goals and objectives, super important in leadership, to be able to tell your team where they're supposed to march. You've all worked for companies where everybody's going. It used to be the thing about Sun is that Scott McNeely was all about setting his teams loose to just kind of scrum against one another. I forget what sport he played, but it was I think, was it hockey or something like that, where he was used to that scrum approach. The problem is it made the teams compete against each other, and it deleted resources or diminished resources. So it's really important to have clear goals and directions so that your team, clear goals and objectives, so your teams then can go pursue the right things and y'all are moving forward in the same direction. And then we see communication, flexibility, committed to training for the troops. That's important. We all want to feel like we're continuing to learn. Open communication and open to new ideas. These are things that shouldn't surprise you, but the mindset really is about being aware, being authentic, listening. This is something a lot of leaders are not good at, but the best ones are, is that if you're listening. So even as an individual contributor, that awareness and that listening skill is really important, because you can start to hear where things are mismatching. You can hear where things are in alignment, and then you can speak up about those issues. Okay, so that keys us up to our guest today, Keith Sbrial. Yeah?
Yep.
The key to career advancement is how I titled this talk, because I think it has to do with anyone who wants to move their career forward. And Keith, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. I want to thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited that you're here, and hopefully we're putting together a good week of shows to help folks get their careers in shape, either those who are working or those who are job hunting.
Right. And that's a lot of people now. I mean, if you imagine, in the last 4 to 5 weeks, 28 million people have lost their job. That's just, it gives you pause for sure. And it sets up a reality in our economy overall that is just really a tough mountain to climb. Right. So the kind of
million, like that's a number, I think for a lot of us, we can't even, you can't even process that.
Right. It's hard to think about that. So, well, listen, like you said, I'm Keith Sbrial. I work for my company, Apochromatic, and we work with folks on their career trajectory, a lot of folks on career transition, and a lot of career development skills in general. And one of the things that you've been talking about here in the 2 slides that you had really all boiled down to communication and leadership. And that's something that if you're in any aspect, if you have a pulse at this point, you need to have communication and leadership, and good communication leads to good leadership. So the skill that we oftentimes talk about there is executive presence, and that's what we were going to talk about today, because that leads to good communication and effective leadership. And so that's what I talk to a lot of folks about, and what I try to work with folks on with their executive presence. The key is that so many people think that it's either something you have or you don't have, right? And that really isn't the case. These are skills that you have the agency to change for yourself. And working on 1 or 2 things can really pull along other factors of your presence and create a situation where you're really improving your overall outlook. And it can put you heads in front of other people when you're competing for that position, or you're trying to get that promotion. And so it's really important. But the key there is something that you said 2 or 3 times in the introduction, which is authenticity. You have to improve your presence in an authentic way to you. This isn't about giving some sort of bizarro sales pitch on an elevator where you're like, "Hi, I'm Keith Sbrial and I'm going to sell you the moon." That isn't what this is about. This is about really, truly amplifying your skills and your, the talents you have in a way that benefits those in the audience that you're serving. So that's what we talk about. That's what we work with folks on.
So Keith, I'm a little intimidated, because if I'm not an executive, how the heck am I going to act like an executive? I mean, that sounds.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's a phrase, right? Executive presence, but it goes by so many things. And one of the first things I do when I have a workshop with folks is to brainstorm all of the different words that come to mind when they think about executive presence. And there's always so many things, right? Whether it's communication or knowing how to read a room, or your appearance or your gravitas, or however you want to classify that. But the bottom line is it comes down to your effectiveness in leadership and communication, right? So those skills, you don't have to be sitting in a C-suite to benefit from those. Whether you're negotiating with your 10-year-old on when they're going to go to bed, or you're trying to convince your spouse that you need to buy a new computer. Not that I have any experience with that. Or you're working on a contract and a big deal and you are sitting in the C-suite. Those skills of communicating and leading are key to getting your opinion and your direction and your desired outcome across. So it isn't just people in the C-suite. It is certainly everyone that has a pulse that needs to benefit from that. And so if it makes you more comfortable to call it presence, you can call it presence, or you can call it political skill, small p, not big P,
Right.
political skill, or whatever you want to call it. But it is that that ability to get what you intend to get, or to convince who you intend to convince, or to communicate what you want to communicate that we're talking about.
So it's generally influencing, right? Because that's my thing, right? It's all influencing. And that, again, people want to think that's a dirty word, but we do it all day long,
right,
without even realizing we're influencing it. From, honey, can you take out the garbage this time, to, I really need somebody to help me do something. I mean, that's all influencing.
And a lot of times it comes down to, your job, whether you're in sales or whether you're, you have a desk job, or whatever the case may be. Oftentimes, if you think about your tasks at their very root core, it may be to influence a customer, or to influence someone below you, or a subordinate, or it may be to influence your team, or it may be to influence above you. But regardless of what you're doing, it's about influence, communication, and leadership. So what I tell people a lot, and one of the kind of secret sauce type items, is to really be intentional about every situation you go into. So have kind of that, I tell people literally, have situational intention with your presence. So when you look at your calendar in the morning, it takes you 2 minutes to go through and think about the things that you're doing to meet with people, or Zoom calls that you have now, or whatever those items are in your calendar. And think about what you want the outcome to be. Think about how you want that interaction to go. And so when you look at your calendar and you realize you have a meeting with, someone who's been relatively difficult to work with at your office, or a difficult situation with a colleague, think about that for a couple minutes before you go into that call, and think about the most productive way that you can come out the other side of that interaction. And that alone is going to improve your executive presence. It's going to improve how you appear, how you show up, and how you are able to influence what you want from that interaction. Okay. So that's kind of like
what you just said is so important, because I think typically, at least often, a female response is to look at something like that, and we have that sense of dread. We go, oh, it's going to be that hard meeting today, and it's going to suck, and they're going to talk over me, or I'm going to have to work doubly hard. But instead, you're saying, take the pivot, don't come at it maybe from a victim response, but instead look at it as, I can do this, but I'm going to right now set my intention of how it's going to go before I go in there. Knowing all the factors, knowing things might be difficult, but it's really taking control of it in your mind and being really intentional when you walk forward, and to come at it not with that negative energy, but to come at it in a real positive way.
Right. And it puts you in a framework that even if things go sideways quickly and completely derail, you still have something of a plan for how you wanted it to go. So you can try to turn that train around. I mean, you don't have to just give up. And, we've all been in those meetings or interactions where it gets off on the wrong foot and it just spirals out of control until the very last minute of the meeting, and then you're done. having that situational intention before you go into something gives you the control and the power and a foundation kind of to ground yourself and to come back to that and to try to turn that around when you're having that meeting. So it's really important to think about things that way and to work on kind of that mental state. So we have a whole bunch of tools that we work with clients on to put you in that state of mind. And a lot of this has to do with, emotional intelligence skills that allow you to show up the way you want to show up and the way you've designed your approach to certain meetings or conversations or relationships.
That's so interesting because I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence on my Motivation Monday, because I think it was a hot topic a while back and then it got lost. And now, during a time when people's lives are literally on the line in working with businesses and going back out in the world, I think that emotional intelligence is going to be so key and really be the dividing line between who succeeds and who fails. Because if you aren't listening and being aware, and that's your point, which it's so interesting to me because I think so many of us think of, at least in business, meetings are these, you're going to spin the wheel and we're going to see how this meeting turns out, right? You're either going to defer to the leader or, you're going to end up on your phone dicking around because you can't stand it. But you're actually saying, no, stop, no spinning the wheels, no lottery in this meeting. Actually be there and know what you need to get out of it and what matters to you.
And just imagine if everybody came into that meeting that way. They might all be on, diabolically different positions as to where they're coming into it. But if they all had a plan and they were all going into it with the good intention of coming out the other end with a solution, that you'd have a lot more efficiency there and a lot more, probably a lot more productivity. So, we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, and I think it's really important to point out to people that, when I said originally, you have the agency to change these things. The great thing about emotional intelligence and how it interacts with your presence is that you can figure out what one or two things are going to be easiest for you to work on. And you can take this time during your stay at home or COVID-19 social distancing time period, and you can work on one or two of those things very, very efficiently. And if you pick one or two things that you're maybe not great at right now, but you know that you can get there, you work on one or two things and it pulls other things with it. So oftentimes, if you're going to work on a skill like maybe being comfortable communicating or being comfortable talking on Zoom or actually speaking up when you have something to say, and you intentionally work on that, it pulls along your confidence with it. So you get these side benefits of additional pieces of emotional intelligence that also build your presence. So this is something that, particularly now when we're sitting at home and we're doing most of our communicating like this over technology, you can work on these things, and it's a great time to do it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I often think of my friends who are shy, used to be old world word, or introverted, or they just don't have the confidence. It's exactly what you said, but the idea of speaking up, building your confidence, you don't have to worry about building your confidence because that sounds abstract, hard, and frankly impossible, right? But just know I'm going to actually add my 2 cents. I'm going to feel comfortable and safe. My God, we're in our own homes. How safe could you be, right? To just try to put my idea out there, and then to just be good with that. It doesn't even matter what happens after that, but just know you just took that huge step of speaking up. That makes so much sense to me as a way for someone to start. Are there a couple other things like that are regular things that can help build that confidence?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, like I said, is go through your interactions and make sure that you have those situational intentions. I think next, probably the best way to build your presence is it's a little more difficult. So I'll talk about 3 things, but this one I'm going to talk about is a little bit more difficult, and that's seek feedback. So talk to your peers, talk to your whoever, your parents, your neighbors, your coworkers, your supervisors. find out what it is that they see in you or they see about you. Or if you have something like a team meeting you're leading, or particular thing that you're doing for work, and you achieve it and it's done, don't just ask, hey, how did I do, and get the proverbial, you did a great job. Go further and say, what could have I improved, or how could I improve for next time? Or the key's in the question, right? You need to ask a question that's open-ended and dives deeper, so that you get some quality feedback. And when you get that feedback, be open to it. The one thing that I find with clients that is really difficult for folks to do is improve their presence or their executive presence if they're not willing to accept feedback. So we have an executive presence quiz online that kind of, you can rate yourself on different things and get a result from it. And as soon as I put that out there, I've been researching executive presence for a couple of years, put this thing together. As soon as I put it out there, a person took this quiz, and it was someone I knew, and almost immediately emailed me and said, my executive presence is great. This thing told me it isn't. Well, if you're unwilling to listen to some feedback, the likelihood is you might have something to work on. And so feedback is really important. And that doesn't mean that everyone's criticism of you is necessarily right, but really take time to think about it and be open to it, and understand that almost anyone, whether you're Bill Gates or whoever the leader you look up to is, Steve Jobs, there are situations where they can improve, and we hear about those failings in leaders all the time. We hear about places where they fall short. And so everybody can improve, is my point. And feedback is the key to that. So openly accept feedback and think about it. And then the third thing I think that you probably need to do to just clean up your executive presence, I think, is especially key right now if you're applying for jobs or if you're out of work. Make sure that the outward version of you is as clean as it can be, and it explains what value you provide to a potential employer situation. So make sure that your social media profiles don't have anything offensive in them, don't have anything that is questionable. It's really funny. A couple of years ago, I guess now probably 10 years ago, I was applying for an executive position in city management, and I was a finalist, and they did a background search, and the recruiter came back to me and said, "You have a social media post on Twitter that has the word barf in it, and it's really kind of off-putting. I would change that." And I'm like, at the time I had used Twitter once a year for a conference where, they had conference, hashtags or whatever. And I had forgotten that indeed someone had thrown up on my wife in an airplane. And I had pointed out that the flight attendant said, "I'll get a napkin." And I said something to the effect of, "Thanks, American Airlines," and used the word barf in the tweet. Well, she thought that the recruiter thought that might be a little bit off-putting, and certainly, it's not a major thing, but brush those things up, because you have time right now to look at it. So make sure your LinkedIn profile talks about the value you add to a situation, and really authentically talks about what you bring to the game. Because it isn't you walking into a room in a suit and a tie and shaking hands with somebody, but it is your digital footprint, right? And it's your digital outward presence. And so take some time to work on that as well. I think it's really important.
It's interesting. It's what they do, not what they say situation. So on social media, and some of us, me, are much more prolific on social media than others. But the thing is, my whole thing is to be authentic. So at least I'm willing to own, gosh, barf seems so trivial compared to what I've done, but I'm willing to own who I am. I know, yeah, that's pretty hardcore.
It was a few years ago.
Years ago, yeah. And we all have a lot higher tolerance, and I think everybody's been vulnerable now. But the thing is, it's be authentic. The point is be
Right.
authentic and be willing to own it. And if you aren't, get it off of there, because
Yeah.
it's the first foot forward that people are now vetting folks through channels you didn't expect. And that's when they see what you do. If you are a drunk and you're posting drunk stuff, you're
Yep.
going off the list, buddy. You're not going to
Yep.
make it. Like, unless maybe you're applying for sales, but otherwise, no. And I wanted to just go back a minute on the feedback too, because I think a lot of people think feedback means bad. And I'm one of them. I take feedback hard, and I don't know why, because when I provide feedback, I'm never saying, I hate you, you stink. I'm saying,
Right.
I love you, you're great, and you could be greater, versus you suck and here's why. That's not how feedback should work. And most people who are doing it well, who care about you, are not telling you, giving you feedback to make you think you suck. They want you to do better. They think you're already awesome and they want you to do better.
Right. And that's that brings up a good point, is that the art of giving feedback is almost as complicated as the art of receiving it. Right. So you want to be sure, particularly if you have people that report to you, that you're doing your best to give feedback as well. And certainly there's things you can do to learn a little bit about that and figure that out. But if you have someone who's telling you suck, that probably isn't a great person to judge your entire workflow and what you do on. But there are a lot of people out there that are going to be willing to give you really productive feedback that you can trust, and that's it's really important.
So Amy talked about yesterday, you guys have some amazing free resources that folks can take advantage of. One is the quiz you talked about. I think I see it at the top of the site if you come in, and that's to see how you rank out on your executive presence. What does it give you a profile of? I haven't taken the quiz yet because I've been so busy getting ready, but that tells you what you could focus on.
So if it's career week for you, there's a bunch of stuff that you can get out there that will be really helpful. First is the quiz, www.enhancedep.com, and it's at the top of our regular website too, like you said. And that will give you, you answer 10 questions, and it'll give you a summary of, kind of how you're showing up and what level you're at. And then you'll get some information from us emailed to you about different methods you can use to work on your executive presence and to continue to improve. Now we also have at applechromatic.com, you can see how that's
I know you have it spelled there. That's nice. For those of you listening, it's the word we learned yesterday, APOCHROMATIK, but it will always be in the description of the podcast. So don't worry, you don't have to memorize it.
It's normally, I don't know if Amy talked about that. It's a word that means clearing distortions, and it's used in the making of camera lenses. So I'm a photography buff, and so that's where that came from.
No, I love it now, and now I see the beauty of the logo too. So it's pretty cool.
Now it's spelled with at the end with a K, because my name's Keith, and normally it's a C. But anyway, but if you go to applechromatic.com and you can either go to the website or you can do /COVID-19. We've started to compile a list of things and resources and videos that will be directly applicable if you're looking to improve your career, looking to improve your position, maybe looking for a job now, and all of those type of COVID-related things. So that's just at /COVID-19. And, I think that's whether it's a resume that you're trying to make sure that you have in tip-top shape, or it's interviewing skills, or it is working on your overall executive presence, this is a really good time to do it. Because if nothing else, you're not commuting, you're not doing all the other things and errands that suck up so much of our time. And so a small investment now in time can really give you a head above the rest when you're getting back into the real working world and trying to build up that career. So that's where we've been focusing with folks. We've been doing right away, right at the beginning, we started cocktails during COVID, and we do that on Monday and Thursday nights, and we guaranteed we were going to do it through April. I think we might be extending it sounds like, but it's a networking and problem solving and coaching 1 hour cocktail hour at 5 o'clock on Monday and Thursdays. And we've had people from all the way from London to the West Coast join us.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock Chicago time. So I'm thinking it's going to really work for those of us on the West Coast. I'm going to try to make it tomorrow because that's 3 o'clock drinking. That's
perfect
for that.
For COVID. Right. And it's kind of nice because one night someone needed to figure out how to create a yard sign display for a graduation party, and someone else on the call had the answer for their particular suburb or place that they were living. And so we have solved problems, we have networked, and it's become a nice little community. But the key is, I think, is to make sure that you're taking time to not only worry about what's going on in the world and become socially isolated, but also to think about all of these things that you have the opportunity to do now and try to make this as positive of an experience as possible. And certainly with respect to careers, that's going to be a really important thing in the coming months as we try to recover from 20 jobs being lost and a significant change in our economy.
So not to ask you a gotcha question, and it might be, but I don't mean to be. So the folks that work with you, and I know you do the coaching and interviews and really coaching on the executive presence, I know is one of your things. Do you have any success stories where you've watched someone really grow? I know you can't use names, but where you've really seen a difference after this?
So one of the things that really created this, so I've been doing this on an in-person level or over Zoom for quite some time. And one of the early, when I was just putting the program together, we're actually going to put it out later, or I guess not later this month, in May. So that would be late March. We're putting this out on a virtual format so more people can participate in it. But when it was an in-person program that I was calling Enhanced EP, Enhanced Executive Presence, one of my first clients came in and said, I started this job, I work there, and the position above me is opening up, and I really wanted it because I think I'm more qualified for that than I am for the position I'm in right now. And I asked them about it, and they said that, I just wouldn't qualify. And I said, why? And she said, well, they said that the position has a lot of customer-facing roles and a lot of public speaking. And she said, well, you haven't even seen me public speak. I don't do that in my current role. And they said, yeah, but we've seen you in meetings and we know how you are, around the office. So, and
I'm feeling triggered. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this feedback kind of did that. I mean, it triggered her. It hit her like a ton of bricks because here she is, an incredibly intelligent person, graduating from Ivy League schools, and really, really a leader in her profession. And that's the feedback she received. And so it became kind of a mission to turn this around. And, when one of the things with executive presence is it's being ready for opportunity, right? Well, that opportunity was in front of her and she seemingly missed it. But the reality is hiring takes a long time in some organizations, right?
Yeah.
So she started working with me and we worked for 6 weeks straight on some of the things I talked about today in more formal methods, and in exercise and whatever. And at the end of that 6 weeks, she put in her application for that position and she got the job because she had changed the way that she approached not only public speaking, standing in front of a microphone in front of 200 people and giving a speech, but how she interacted on a daily basis. And there's so many aspects of that with executive presence, like how you come into a room, how you attend a meeting, how you show up, that matter. And so when she started realizing that and setting that situational intention every day, and then we also do something called a personal presence brand, where different than an elevator pitch where you're kind of like, bragging about yourself, whatever, you really convince yourself every day of what value you bring and how important you are to whatever organization or work you do. And that could be volunteer work, it could be anything. And she really put her mind to that, and she really went all in on this. And she got the position, and she's very, very thrilled with that. And so those kind of things are, they're things that happen all the time. It's really exciting. I mean, it makes my job fun. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is such a good story, and I am super excited because to hear that, especially when I hear about women in business, because I feel like we often face some additional challenges.
For sure.
Especially that feedback that you introduced is something I've heard before, which is kind of that, well, we've seen you, and it's like, no, I'm here working like a dog. You don't even know how hard I work, but that hard work doesn't matter if you're not perceived in the way that's important. And everything you said, from being intentional to having to how you manage your personal brand, how you're managing what you're putting out there, how you sit in a meeting and how you respond, all those things, I mean, you're singing a song that I just love. And I think it's so important, and men and women, but I really feel like women need to hear this a lot, because it's really easy to feel like you get overlooked. I mean, we know the numbers bear that out.
Or tagged bitchy or aggressive, which is just so disappointing when that happens. I mean, and that's just
right. Yeah.
One of those things that set you back, 10 feet from where you started, and really just pisses you off. Right. I mean, and how do you dig back out from that? And the solution really is in tweaking that, that presence that you have, and dealing with that in an effective way.
And that intention, because had I been wise enough back when I was dealing with this stuff to have shifted my intention, because instead I just got mad, and I just felt one down, and even
which is natural. I mean, that's, why wouldn't you be mad?
Yeah, especially if you're a hard worker, which clearly the story you just described is somebody who was working really hard. They were showing up. But if you're not giving them the care and feeding, and nobody's going to do it for you, if you're not taking care of yourself. So, okay, Keith, I've got the screen up to make sure that people can see the URL, but people can get in touch with you. You do coaching specifically around this issue.
I do.
And go ahead.
My email is keith@applechromatic.com. You can shoot me an email. You can get in contact with us on the website. The phone number's on there as well on the website, and feel free to reach out. We do a lot of stuff around career development. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a C-suite executive. You just have to want to get better, and want to, you want to have your career take off like a rocket. That's what we do, is we work with folks.
That's right. And people, don't let this slip through your fingers. I did, and I should have been stronger. And I really want to encourage you. I mean, I've learned a lot at coaching school, but it's the same concept, which is you are your best advocate. Be authentic, be intentional, and just don't let these opportunities, you work too hard to not get what you deserve.
You spend all these years in school, and you spend all these years trying to cultivate a career, but nobody ever teaches us. Our parents don't teach us, and the schools don't teach us, and our colleges don't teach us how to craft a career and how to work that trajectory. And that's critical. It's an investment that'll pay off well into retirement, which I know you're talking about tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially you'll love your job so much more with that intention and that awareness, and not feeling less than. You're going to really, really soar. So Keith, thank you so much for coming today. This was great.
Absolutely.
We're putting together a good week this week. It's a great week. So I'm going to try to come join you guys for a little drinky poo tomorrow. So
okay.
A lot of fun. And I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I will see you next time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith.